This is the video I wish someone had made for me when I graduated from dental school back in 2010. If you're a dentist and you're in that early phase of your career where it's just been a few years since you've graduated dental school, this is the video I wish someone made for me when I was coming out of residency. It's been 14 years since I've graduated from dental school. It's crazy where time flies. But if there's one thing I've learned, is that whatever you do in the first few years in your career sets you up for the next 5 to 10 or even longer in your life. Maybe you're an associate working for another doctor, or you may have already bought yourself your own practice right after graduation. Regardless of where you are, if you're in that early phase of your career, you may be starting to think about things like, hey, did I make the right decision going to dental school, taking on all this massive student loan debt? With the inflation and the housing market going crazy, should I be buying a house first, or should I invest into buying my own practice first? What about CEs? What about continuing education? How many CEs should I be taking? What should I be focusing on? I remember going through this phase where at times I felt like I had made the wrong decision. I questioned my own clinical skills whenever patients got upset. Well, I'm gonna share with you my personal experience of what worked for me and how I got over all of that. We'll talk about practice ownership. Is it worth it? When's the best time to go out on your own? Lots of questions, lots to think about. And I bring all this up because in the beginning, I faced lots of anxiety because I was in stupidly crazy amounts of debt. And I thought I would never come out of it. I'm gonna share with you my personal experience, and this is not meant to be any sort of financial advice because I'm just a random dentist talking on YouTube about things that I did early on. Depending on your risk tolerance, you may choose to do things differently. And I feel very strongly about this topic that we're gonna cover in this video because how much dental school costs these days, you have to be thinking about these things if you wanna do dentistry on your own terms so you don't get burnt out and you want to have fun doing it, and most importantly, make a good living. If you're new to this channel, my name is Nilesh Shah. This is where I share what I'm doing in my own practice every day, running the business operations. I share with you what's working, what's not working, my wins and losses. And to stay updated on this type of content, please feel free to join our free newsletter over at dentalstartupacademy.com. I will share the link below this video for those of you who believe in taking action. Let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is the thing that most of you are gonna run into as soon as you graduate dental school, which is your student loans. By the way, if you don't have student loans, congratulations, that is amazing. Count your blessings because believe me, you have a head start. So please feel free to skip this next section and go on to the next section. So you've all heard the saying, there's good debt and then there's bad debt. Taking out a big loan to buy a Ferrari is considered bad debt, unless of course you're using the Ferrari to generate cash flow for your luxury car rental business. But student loans, on the other hand, fall into good debt because it allows you to generate income as a dentist for the rest of your working life. Me personally, I do agree with it. However, the cost of attending dental school have gone up. It was expensive when I went, and it's even more expensive today. So I went to ChatGPT and asked it to give me the list of most expensive dental schools. And here's what I got. Some of these don't even include the cost of room and board, other living expenses, etc. So then what I did is I picked UCLA and Harvard from this list and I compared the values against what I found directly from their website. And here's what I got. Here's UCLA's. That's a total of $467,000. And here's Harvard's. The list of their fees didn't even fit on my screen, so I had to keep scrolling. But here's a close-up of the total fees. That's almost $500,000. And this is the amount of debt that you're coming out of school with. And these numbers don't even include the accrued interest while you're in dental school. And usually the repayment doesn't start for 6 months after you've graduated from dental school or have completed a residency. But you're starting your career with massive debt. And everyone is different when it comes to debt. Some may tell you it's okay, just pay the minimum every month for the next 2 to 3 decades of your life and you'll be fine. Some may tell you that yes, go ahead and pay a little bit extra every month. Some may tell you that, hey, be aggressive and pay down as soon as possible. Well, I fall into the last category. I was thinking about student loans since first day of dental school. I wanted to pay down as soon as possible. It was more mental for me. It was kind of like I was constantly carrying around this big piece of brick over my head. I had several loans. Some I consolidated, but the average interest rate hovered around between 5.5% to 6.8%. When I graduated dental school, I also had undergraduate student loans, which accumulated interest while I was in dental school on top of the interest for dental. So as an associate, my income as a dental associate once I graduated wasn't making much of a dent in the balance at all. You know, every four or 5 months or so, I checked the balance and it almost felt like it wasn't moving at all. It was like all the payments were going towards the interest. Nothing was changing. But I knew that the only way out of this was to get into my own business or getting into your own practice. We'll get into talking about practice ownership in a few, and I'm also going to share with you the picture of my Bank of America practice loan application, and at the time, why I felt like I had hit rock bottom. But getting back to student loans, I know there are a bunch of loan repayment programs out there, so do your research and pick the one that fits your situation the best. Looking back, paying back my loans aggressively probably wasn't the best financial decision from an investor perspective, because I could have made passively 8 to 10% investing in the stock market consistently. But at the same time, I wasn't thinking about any of that. You're just coming out of dental school. You go straight from high school to undergrad to dental school. You finally graduate and you're thinking, finally I'm a dentist. I need to make some income to pay down all this debt. So for me, the decision wasn't just financial. The decision was being shaped by my cultural beliefs, my upbringing, my surrounding when I was growing up. I grew up in India, and one thing my father always taught me was that debt should always be repaid first. So before you buy yourself something nice, if you owe money, you better take care of that first. We grew up buying things only when you could pay for it in cash. There were no loans. There were no loans for houses. The mortgages didn't exist growing up in India at that time. There were no loans for two-wheelers, which most of us middle class used as their primary mode of transportation to get around. We only bought it when we had enough cash for it, whether you're buying it used or new. So that's the mindset I was in when I was coming out of dental school. So having a big loan like this shapes every single decision you make after graduating dental school. Where you live, what kind of house you buy, what kind of car you drive, what clothes you wear, how often you go out to eat, etc. So I wasn't thinking like an investor. Looking back, knowing what I know today, I still think I made the right decision. But today, the amount you're graduating with, you should look at the interest rates. And depending on your income, you've got to look at the options after you consider the living expenses, which should include your minimum payments required student loans. Now, I'm not saying that you should only make minimum payments for your student loans, but you need to include it as part of your living expenses when you're considering your bills versus the income that you're bringing in. Let's talk about where you want to go in the next 1 to 5 years. Your vision. We don't have to make crazy long-term goals, but you can start with the first 1 to 3 years and then think about year 4 and then 5. I'm sure you've heard of the saying, we overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 3 to 5 years. And looking back, this is 100% true for me. It's good to have big, lofty goals. Maybe you'd like to have a dental empire like hundreds of offices. Maybe you'd like to open up 10 offices in the next 5 years. It's good to have goals because they're yours. But it helps to break things up. To get there, what do I have to do first? What can you do today starting with what you have today? For most of you, that's going to be student loans. But if you constantly let that bog you down, you're not going to be able to progress and go to the next step. That's the card you're dealt with. You can't undo it. Just accept it and move on. Do not compare yourself to others who don't have student loans. That's what I did, but it doesn't matter. So don't compare yourself. That's how life is. Accept it and move on. Some get a head start and some don't. That's not under your control. But what is under your control is what you can do today. So think about the next 1 to 2 years and think about what it is that you want to do. So what do you need to do to help you achieve your next 5-year goals? Maybe you'd like to have your student loans paid off. Maybe you'd like to open up your own practice where you can work on your own terms. Maybe you'd like to master implant dentistry. Maybe buy a house, start a family if you haven't already. Maybe have more kids. Whatever it is, what can you do today, tomorrow, and this year that's going to help bring you closer to your 5-year goal? Just focus on that and forget everything else. It helps to write things down. I never did when I first started, and I considered it a mistake on my part. But for the past 7 to 8 years, I've been writing a lot. I write things down because it helps me get clarity. But whatever it is you write down has to turn into actionable steps and habits that you're going to perform on a consistent basis that's going to help you bring you closer to your goals. Looking back now, your daily habits and routines will dictate who you become in the next 5, 10, 15, or even 20 years down the line. There are some habits you'll keep forever, like exercising, hopefully, and there are some habits you're going to change over time. Tons of books out there on habits, but my 2 favorites are Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg and Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm sure a lot of you watching have read either one or both of these, but everything in there just makes sense. This is exactly how I operate now with everything that I want to achieve. It's not always perfect. I do fall off my routines quite a bit, but I try to get back right into it. So forget perfection, embrace it. If you fall off your routines, get back into it. So there's incredible power in writing things down and being intentional instead of just living and going through your each day, weeks, and years like a zombie with no plans, even for your short-term goals. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about continuing education. I don't have to tell you why it's important, but it's probably the best thing you could do for your personal as well as professional journey in dentistry. Why personal? Because there's going to be a point when you've been seeing patients for a while, for some of you maybe 6 months, some of you maybe 1 to 2 years, but you're going to hit a plateau in terms of what you think you know. You've been doing the same procedures over and over again from what you learned in dental school without any outside perspective. So it becomes super mundane. I know I felt this way in the first 6 months of my associateship. I had to learn something new to keep things exciting. I wanted to learn new techniques of doing composites, doing impressions, photography, etc. So what I found is when I go ahead and learn something new, I wanted to implement it right away on my patients so that I could see the results. It was this amazing feedback loop where I learn something new, take action, and get to see results. It just took away from the everyday mundane things I was doing before. It basically adds a level of excitement, and I think that's super important. So why is continuing education great professionally? Well, one, it should add to your income because you're either improving on the procedure you're already doing, or you've learned something new and now you get to implement it in your practice and offer it to your patients during treatment planning what you weren't doing before. If you start early on, you learn something new, you practice it on your own patients, you improve as you go along, you make mistakes, but you keep going, you're improving, and eventually you master it. Once you get to a certain point, it becomes second nature to you. Your patients love it. So now you start to share this process on social media like YouTube or Instagram. Your patients want to get the treatment from you because they keep seeing you online. Other doctors are asking if you teach this stuff. Maybe you could start your own CE. It opens up opportunities for you. Now you get to teach stuff that you already know how to do, that you've been doing for a long time and actually get paid. Today, there's so much to learn. There's so many courses out there, whether it's in person or online. But one of the factors though is cost. Some of these live seminars or courses, depending on how long they run, can range in the cost from like hundreds to thousands to $20,000 to $30,000. If I was starting today, I would invest into CEs that I know that I can implement right away in the practice I work in. So if I'm an associate, I want to make sure that whatever I learn, I can implement right away on the patients. That's how I did it when I first started and I was an associate working for another doctor. I would invest into smaller CEs that I paid myself, and these were usually courses being taught by the local study clubs. But I knew that I would be able to go and implement these techniques on the Monday next week in the office on my own patients. You don't want to go and do an entire implant continuum when you don't even know that you will be allowed to place the implants and actually implement the new techniques of placing implants in the place you work in. So plan your CEs and spending accordingly to the procedure you'll be allowed to do where you work. And of course, this is all true if you're working for another practice. So what kind of CEs should you take? There's a variety of CEs available. Ortho, implants, fixed pros, composites, 3D printing. In the beginning, you really don't know what you like or don't like. So try a variety of procedures, but key is implementation. I knew in the beginning that I hated molar endo. So I never did it in my practice. And that's why I never took CE. And I hated it because I wasn't confident. And sure, some may say you should take CE and get better at it. But if you really don't like the procedure, you're not gonna spend the money learning the procedure, and you're not even gonna put in the effort to learn the procedure, let alone find patients to do it on. I took Invisalign CEs when I was opening up my own practice, but it turns out I hated doing it on my own patients because of compliance issues. I chose the wrong patients to do it on because I was in a hurry to get started. So I stopped doing any ortho for the first 8 years of my practice until just recently I jumped into 3D printing and I started doing clear aligners in my practice. As a GP, if I was starting out today, I would definitely learn implants. Get very good at doing extractions, grafting, membrane placement, basically preparing the area for future implants. And as you feel comfortable, you can start moving towards immediate placements. And I'm not even talking about full arch implants. I'm talking about single missing tooth being replaced with single unit implants. the ROI is amazing for the amount of chair time required with the patient. It's super profitable even at the PPO fees. Next on the list as a general dentist starting out is I would definitely learn some form of ortho. I know there are comprehensive continuums out there that teach you wire orthodontics, but I never took one of these. But if you'd like to offer some form of ortho services to your patients, I would definitely learn clear aligners. Whether it's Invisalign or any other brand, learn to do it well and incorporate it into your comprehensive treatment planning. So let's talk about molar endodontics. If you don't mind doing root canals on molars, I, for one, absolutely hate it. The last time I did a molar endo was on my first patient at my first job out of residency. It was tooth number 2 on an upper right second molar. Thank God it turned out okay. It took me 2 hours to do it, but I have not done molar endo since then. But if you can tolerate the procedure and you can learn to do it well, it's probably one of the best profitable procedures you can do without a lot of overhead. So take all possible CEs you can to get really good at it. Learn to do it within an hour, hour and a half, but more importantly, learn to do it well. As I said, it is one of the best practice builders because, as you know, lots of patients don't go to the dentist regularly. They only go to the dentist when they have pain. And majority of the times, it happens to be these back molars. So if you can put these patients out of pain, they will become your patient from that point on. But I know lots of us general dentists don't want to do molar endo. The reason why I brought up orthodontics and implants is for us GPs, besides the bread and butter dentistry like basic restorative and crown and bridge, these higher ticket procedures will actually help you boost your productions and of course your take-home income. And in today's economic environment with increasing payroll costs, increasing supply costs, and flattening insurance fees, you have no choice but to prioritize keeping these higher ticket procedures in-house. Let's talk about practice ownership. I remember in dental school, I talked to some students and they already knew that they wanted to open up their own practice one day. Not everyone's the same though. I wasn't. I had no clue. I was just trying to get through dental school because I know how much it was costing me to stay in it. But some questions that do pop up when you're thinking about practice ownership is things like, well, when should I start thinking about practice ownership? How can I prepare? Is it right for me? I don't know anything about running a business. Do I need an MBA? Let's start with talking about when you may want to start thinking about practice ownership. For some, like I mentioned earlier, they already know they want to become practice owners. Maybe someone in their family is a dentist, so they already had it planned from beginning. But for most of us, we know we want to own one day, but we want to get our feet wet first working for other doctors. And I remember working for other doctors and I was about a year into my associateship and I talked to other colleagues and they would say things like, well, before I go out on my own, I have to work for like other doctors for at least like 5 years. And I heard this repeatedly over and over again. It's like they had this preconceived notion that you couldn't go out on your own sooner and you had to work for other doctors first for a very long time just to get the experience. Maybe you have other things going on in your life. Maybe you're starting to have kids or whatever it is that's keeping you from focusing and thinking about practice ownership. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong answer here. The point is the right time to start thinking about practice ownership is sooner than later, whenever that may be for you. There's never a perfect time to do anything. Okay, I'll just wait until I have $100,000 saved up in my bank. I'll wait until my kids are a little older, or I'll wait until I know how to do implants, or I'll wait until I know how to do full mouth constructions, etc. The point is, the right time to start a practice is when you're asking yourself whether or not you should start. And if you're thinking about it, there's something going on in your head that's telling you that, hey, I can do better. I have more potential than what I'm doing in this office working for this other doctor. And I'm not able to provide the services that I want to provide to my patients because I'm in the wrong demographic. So how do you start? What are some things you need to think about? Instead of going into the details of the how in this video, I've actually done a video specifically on this topic on how to start a dental office from scratch. So I would recommend you watch that video because I cover all the major steps involved in starting a dental office from scratch. And I also link to detailed articles that I've written on specific topics that you can use as a reference. Do you need an MBA to start your dental practice? No, you don't need an MBA, but that answer completely depends on you. Can you learn on the go? Are you okay with not knowing what to do next and taking the next step anyways? You graduated from dental school, so I know you know how to focus and get things done on a timeline. Well, business is no different. You can never start too early to start learning about the business side of dentistry, even if you're an associate. When I graduated from residency, I was working at 2 different offices. One office was super large, I think 18 ops, 2 managers, huge front desk team, but the other office was smaller. It had about 4 ops. The owner was there only 2 days, and the other 2 days I was there. So at the smaller practice, what I started doing was I was tracking my own patients. Whoever had a treatment plan that was larger than $1,000 and they had an unscheduled appointment, I would add their name onto this Google Sheet and had columns set up for their next scheduled appointment and when their follow-up date was, and etc. And I had asked the owner whether this was okay. He was so happy that I was taking the matter into my own hands, and he even gave me autonomy to run the practice kind of like my own. I became good friends with the manager also, so I looked at my net production reports daily on the days I was there to make sure everything made sense. I was paid on adjusted production, which meant that if I prepped the crown on an insurance patient, for example, I would be paid my portion of the insurance fee for that crown. But if in the future there was an issue with the collection, that amount would be deducted from my adjusted production in the future date for that day. Some may say this is getting paid on collections, but in fact, it was actually in hybrid. And I was actually okay with getting paid this way when I started with them. I'd look at the adjustments, I would look at the lab portion that was taken off of my adjusted production to make sure it all made sense. And there were times I had to go back to the owner because I know mistakes were made. Either too much was taken off my production, so I had to go back to them and have them adjusted. And I understood the owner actually was a very nice guy who was managing his wife's practice. So he was only there 2 days a week, but they happened to have 2 other offices. So I understood that he was doing payroll for 3 offices. So I was okay when mistakes were being made a few times here and there, as long as they were corrected. The other thing I did differently was I presented my own cases. The associate that was there before me would just handwrite the treatment plan on a piece of paper, hand it over to the treatment coordinator, and then the treatment coordinator would go ahead and enter it into the computer and then enter the patient room, go over the details with the patient, including some clinical details. And I noticed this because there was an overlap between when I came in and before the associate left, because the owner had asked me to come in and observe to get used to the patient flow. So the associate didn't really discuss much details besides telling the patient, hey, you need X and Y crowns on so-and-so teeth, you need a couple of fillings, and then he would say, hey, Laura's gonna come in and go over the details with you. And then he would leave the room. There was a disconnect between the patient and the associate doctor. And I sensed this as the doctor who's just observing over them. And I'm not even sitting in the patient's chair, and I can only imagine what's going on in the patient's mind because they've just been told all this information and they're trying to process everything that was just told to them or were advised of, and they have no time to even ask questions. Then the treatment coordinator would come in, go over their details, then the patient would be brought to a separate room to discuss finances, then they would be brought up to the front desk to actually make the appointment. This continued on for about 2 to 3 weeks until I went up to the owner and said, hey, let me present my own cases, especially when it came time to talking about the clinical details. To me, it made absolutely no sense to have somebody else get into the clinical details, and the owner appreciated this fact because our production actually went up for the next couple of weeks. The patient flow actually improved, well, because the patient is not seeing yet another person who's going to go over the clinical details of whatever I just discussed. They're not brought to a separate room to discuss finances and then see a scheduler to make the final appointment. There was just too much friction. I would present the cases right there in the operatory. Then the patient would be brought to the front to discuss finances and also have the same person make the appointment. And I couldn't have done this at the other office. It was just too big. They had set protocols in place and it was actually a big mess. So if you're working for someone and you plan to go out on your own soon, 1, understand how you're generating income. Learn to understand the numbers you're seeing on your reports, like net production, write-offs, adjustments. Learn them, not just to learn them, but also to understand that you're getting paid correctly. Second, for me, working in multiple practices was the best thing because you get to see how different practices operate. You get to see what's working, what's not working, and then you take the best of both and incorporate it into your own practice. So if you're an associate, I would strongly recommend that you work at more than one location, not just to see how they operate, but also it's possible that you may generate more income at one location than the other. Number 3, improve your communication skills, not just with patients, but also with your team members. We didn't have clinical assistants in dental school. So now, once you enter the private practice world, you have somebody constantly by your chair side. So it may take some time getting used to. It's not the technical or the clinical details. It's the way you articulate yourself with patients, the way you are with your patients and team members. Your team members see how you treat patients, and your patients also see how you are with your team. all of this impacts your case acceptance, meaning your patient's willingness to move forward with treatment. Make small changes to your communication and presentation techniques and measure what's working for you. It's the small changes and improvements over time that have the biggest impact. Learning to work and communicate well with others on your team will have the biggest impact in your practice. And if you can do that, you really don't need an MBA. All right, so much on practice management that we can get into, but make sure to watch the video that I just mentioned earlier if you're going to start your practice from scratch. The next question that comes up often is, I have so much student loan debt, personal loans. Will banks actually lend me money to start a practice? And I'll answer this one by showing you a picture of my exact situation when I was filling out my Bank of America practice application back in 2012 when I started from scratch. So here's the picture of the application. There's a section here called assets versus liabilities. Banks want to know what your assets are, what you own in terms of land, house, how much equity you have in the house. They want to know how much cash you have in the bank, your checking, savings account, your investment accounts, etc. They want to know what your liabilities are in terms of what you owe. You have any car loans, other personal loans, mortgage. They also want to know what your monthly bills are. So you see here, at the time of the loan application, I remember this exact moment because I was writing the application on this small desk in a corner in our one-bedroom apartment. I can recall this exact moment even today. My wife is standing behind me in the kitchen area, and I had tears in my eyes writing down my net worth of a negative $500,000. And at that point, I was completely down, thinking, how did I get myself into this? My undergraduate student loans were about $21K. The dental school balance was about $358 for me. My wife's balance was about $293K. I had $14K worth of car loan, approximately about $600,000 of negative net worth. I never thought about any of this before. But now when you have to write it all out in front of you and you have to go to the bank to ask for even more money, gives you a reality check that, hey, I've got myself into this situation and I've got to get myself out. So the only good news at that time was that banks were willing to lend us money because of our high earning potential and lower default rate. We are low risk to the banks. Banks want to lend money to doctors and dentists because we usually tend to pay back our loans with interest over time. So we made the jump anyways and took on even more debt to start our practice because we knew that starting the practice was the only way to boost our income so we could make a dent in our student loans and all the other debt. And fast forward a few years, here's how it all turned out. So 2013, I remember June 18th, we saw our first patient. January 2016, we paid off all the student loans, mine and my wife's student loans. Mid 2018, we paid off the practice loan and invested into some real estate. In 2019, we paid off our house that we had bought in 2015. So becoming completely debt-free at age 35. I don't say any of this to brag, but to encourage you in your situation because I've been there. I had nothing special going for me. I was coming out with lots of debt and I decided to change my situation by taking on even more risk. So if I can do it, anyone can. Again, this is my timeline. I had dentist friends of mine who opened up multiple practices in the same time frame, but that was their thing and this is mine. So you do whatever that fits your situation and makes you happy. So for those of you wondering or hesitant about practice ownership because of your personal debt situation, do your research, start talking to banks, and see where you stand. Let's move on to the next topic of making dentistry fun and all these things that take away from the mundane stuff and the same routines of dentistry in our lives. I don't have a title for this subject, but it's all the things that keep things exciting, brings you fulfillment in your line of work. It's the continuous learning of new things, etc. To start, let's get into the personal branding / social media. This is something I never did, and it's my biggest regret. Facebook existed when I started my practice back in 2012. However, there was also Instagram. It was never at a point where it is now, but I never really shared my work online, and it's probably one of my biggest regrets. But if I was starting from scratch today, I would not just focus on clinical dentistry, but I would also think about building my personal brand. We could talk all day about building your personal brand, but it all starts with sharing your work online and, more importantly, doing it consistently over time. Your work will only improve. You'll make mistakes, you'll improve over time, but your audience is going to see your journey. And long term, you never know, it leads to lots of opportunities. Let's talk about fulfillment, the happiness factor. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, said by the famous Tony Robbins. I 100% truly believe in this. You want to enjoy your line of work. And I understand in the beginning, it isn't always possible. You're not doing everything with the biggest smile on your face, but at the same time, it shouldn't affect the quality of your work. It's still your responsibility. Pick a procedure or two that you like and go deep, master it. Take as much CE as possible, improve on the procedure over time, implement it on your patients, make mistakes, improve on it more, and more importantly, share your work online. And speaking of practice ownership, if you absolutely hate the thought of practice ownership, don't do it. And I know I talk a lot about practice ownership on this channel because that's the path I took. It doesn't mean you have to do the same. The point is, the goal is for you to get to a point where you're happy with your line of work. Another point that I also want to make is it's okay to have a side hustle outside of dentistry. It's super important. Do whatever that makes you happy. In fact, this is what I did when I became debt-free. I studied computer science in college and became a software developer before I got into dentistry. I'm a nerd at heart. I like building things, especially software. So once I got into my own practice and a few years into it, I saw lots of problems as a business owner. And whenever I run into problems from a developer perspective, you always think about how do I solve this problem with software? And that's exactly what we did. I built my own software to help me solve those problems as a business owner. And this system works especially with Open Dental, which is what I use in my practice. And it turns out other dentists found it helpful as well. So that's what I do now is work on building this software company, which I started with my brother back in pandemic in 2020 and finally launched in 2021. And because I started writing online about what I was doing in my dental practice for all the business side of things, I started building an audience. And eventually, a small portion of this audience became our first initial clients of our software. I'm still in my own practice 2 days a week, so I'm still in the trenches facing the same problems as we all do as business owners. But since the beginning, I was always working on systems. And because of these systems, I'm able to operate on a 2 days a week work schedule, which then allow me to, one, work on the software and build the company. Second, spend more time with my family. Now that I've got 2 little ones who take up majority of my free time, I'm constantly finding myself trying to come up with more time to work more efficiently. So the point is, you don't have to wait until you're into your own practice to start sharing your work online. Even if you work for somebody else, you should start sharing your work online. Maybe you have another hobby. You like working on cars, you play an instrument. Whatever it is, find that outlet. Find the time to continue doing it. Do not let dentistry take up all of your time. If you watched the video so far, thank you for sticking around. If you found this helpful, don't forget to share with your colleagues who may find it helpful in their own journey. Until next time, take care.